from the beautiful island of Oahu. I am Pete Gumataotao, the director of the Daniel K. Inouye Asia Pacific Center for Security Studies. And I'm very honored to have been invited to this conference being hosted by the KDU and the U.S. Embassy at Colombo to discuss a shared vision for the Indo-Pacific. Thank you very much.
Director, with the administration's release of an updated Indo-Pacific strategy, could you maybe start with discussing what the region can expect to stay the same?
That's a very important question. After a year or so of waiting for the Indo-Pacific strategy and it being unveiled just earlier this year in 2022, I would say my first major point is a key takeaway, and that's a message of continuity in the Indo-Pacific strategy. In other words, the U.S.'s interests and intentions in the Indo-Pacific has always been consistent, regardless of administration and through the years. And also a key message to put out on the Indo-Pacific on what's not changed is the importance of the centrality of working with allies and partners. Not just what's working, but also to ask the questions, what's not working? And in looking at the development and implementation of initiative, both collaborative and cooperative, it needs to be a consultative process with all our allies and partners. Given the fact that for many, many decades, for almost 3/4 of a century, the U.S. has led a security umbrella in our region that really has given us really economic growth and prosperity for the most part, it's really incumbent to underscore the fact that this Indo-Pacific strategy once again stresses the importance of preserving and strengthening this liberal, rules-based international order. In the face of mounting challenges that we see by authoritarian states like the PRC to turn and change those rules to be less transparent, more exploitive in nature, and things that we normally do not lead to a more prosperous, collaborative, and inclusive environment. The other piece I want to say about what has not changed with this new Indo-Pacific strategy is that the Indo-Pacific is still recognized by many in the region and around the world as the region of consequence. And I say that because it's incumbent upon all the nations that live in the Indo-Pacific, along with partners beyond the region, to work together in the current rules-based system to preserve that rules-based order, international standards, the values and principles that got us to peace and prosperity. And that's why the U.S. values the partners and allies as an integral part of this Indo-Pacific strategy. The bottom line is, in this Indo-Pacific strategy, it emphasizes the fact that no one country, including the United States, can do it alone to ensure a secure, more prosperous and stable region. It takes a collective effort of like-minded nations, both allies and partners.
So, Director, the message seems to be continuity, but from the perspective of the region, what can they expect to see that has changed with the new strategy?
You know, if you look at the Indo-Pacific strategy, the tendency is to say, what is different? But actually, the question should be, what continues to evolve and grow with respect to the Indo-Pacific strategy? And let me just say up front that President Biden's administration had clearly articulated 5 objectives up front in conjunction with working with allies and partners. The first one, obviously, is talking about advancing a free and open Indo-Pacific. Many of you that have heard this term many, many years, even before the United States was using that term, it gravitates to words such as sovereignty, rule of law, open communication, lines of communication such as our international seas and air domain and even space. Societies that are free of coercion, transparency, and just open lines of communication for collaboration and cooperation. The second objective outlined in the Indo-Pacific strategy is building connections within and beyond the region. And I see many of you understand that the United States is tied to the region in many ways, particularly with our commitment with our allies and many of our regional partners. But we're also seeing through the years a growing involvement and cooperation with countries and regional institutions outside the region, such as the EU and NATO. A third objective is driving Indo-Pacific prosperity. And as if you pause for a moment and you think about prosperity, what do you think about? You think about economic integration. You think about foreign direct investment. You think about the resiliency and the secureness of global telecommunications. All these are necessary lanes to ensure that we have a prosperous and a free and open society in the region. The fourth is building resilience to transnational threats. And when we talk about threats in the 21st century, we have to broaden our aperture and think about resilience to climate crisis, safeguarding of very much coveted natural resources, and looking at how we can coordinate collectively through regional institutions like ASEAN. And the last articulated objectives in the Indo-Pacific strategy is bolstering Indo-Pacific security. And as an institution, a regional center working for the Office of Secretary of Defense, specifically the Assistant Secretary of Defense, Dr. Eli Ratner, back at OSD, this particular objective really is something that I wanted to expand on a little bit more. Particularly when you bolster the Indo-Pacific security, the Secretary of Defense and others have talked about looking at an integrated deterrence. And what I mean by that is collectively being able to work issues from a collective way to innovate and adapt to be able to counter and respond to an evolving threat environment. And a good example of that is the collection of 3 countries with a lot of capacity and capability, Australia, the United Kingdom, and the United States, to say, how can we collectively come together to provide a more integrated deterrence to a lot of the challenges that we have out in the Indo-Pacific region. So let me focus a little bit more about integrated deterrence. And let me just say it up front, it is said in Indo-Pacific strategy, it is said by Secretary of Defense Austin, that integrated deterrence is the cornerstone to the Indo-Pacific security. In fact, it is the single greatest asymmetric strength that our networks of security alliances and partnerships are strong, vibrant, and are interactive. Our focus on integrated defense is to modernize our treaty alliances with Australia, Japan, the ROK, the Philippines, and Thailand. It's also to look at how we can advance our major defense partnerships with incredible regional partners such as India. And it's also to look at how we can strengthen collectively our regional capabilities to address natural disasters, bio threats, trafficking, and cybersecurity threats that make our security environment so complex. The final thing that I would talk about in regards to the Indo-Pacific strategy in terms of what continues to evolve is the emphasis on allies and partners beyond the region and seeing how they too can play a critical role, such as the EU, the UK, France, Germany, and NATO, to be able to provide more resources in terms of capacity and capability to ensure we maintain a free and open Indo-Pacific.
Director, what do you see as being at stake with the implementation of the strategy?
That's a very important question, and I will just be very straightforward about this. The Indo-Pacific, even though we say it's the region of consequence, it's facing some growing mounting challenges, particularly from authoritarian countries and states that want to turn the rules-based order that has given us so much prosperity and stability. China is essentially combining its economic, diplomatic, military, and technological might to be able to pursue a sphere of influence, if I may, in the Indo-Pacific to become what? The world's most influential power. And they're using this using coercion and aggression, not just in our region, but across the globe. But I would say it is more acute and more visible in the Pacific. For example, the economic coercion that we've seen in Australia, or the conflict along the line of control with India, or the pressure that they've been giving to Taiwan across the cross strait, or the bullying of neighbors that we see in the East and the South China Sea. Fundamentally, PRC's approach to free and open goes against the values and principles that we all embrace as like-minded nations, such as undermining human rights and international law. As we have seen in Xinjiang and Hong Kong, undermining the very principles that have brought stability and prosperity to the Indo-Pacific. So in closing, really what's at stake is a persistent, sometimes overt and oftentimes discreet actions through gray zone, assaulting the very values and principles of a free and open Indo-Pacific. The choice is really all of ours, collectively, to ensure that the preservation of the existing framework that has provided us all these many decades of peace and prosperity and development continues, so that we can realize for more generations to come what we are capable as an awesome region in the Indo-Pacific. Thank you very much.